true. We actually were born for a life, and at least part of it should be lived in such embodied ways that we develop healthfully and in integrated and complex ways. More and more, however, we're separating ourselves from our bodies, not just in the way of learning how to use these devices, but we're relying on these devices to tell us about our physical bodies now, right? So we wear these trackers, and they tell us if we've moved enough in a day, or if we need to go to sleep. Or my favorite thing, people will say, I'm so tired, and I'll say, well, how was your sleep? Well, my Fitbit told me I only slept 3 hours. Your Fitbit can't tell you when you're sleeping. It just tells you when you're not moving and makes some inferences about that. That tells the parents on their cell phone or through other means of digital communication the child's heart rate, their respiration, and this one you can even use to talk to your child. So your child is upset and you can talk to them from the other part of the house, like mom or dad's voice comes from this weird disembodied thing on my belly. What is that about? You know, I mean, it's just we are, and this one also measures dampness, so you can tell when a diaper change needs to happen. You can also record these things. You guys know what it's like to be new parents if you're here as a parent, probably. You already have plenty of data that is stressing you out and keeping you awake all night, right? Now we can have inordinate amounts of data that we have no idea what to do with to kind of evaluate and make us even more stressed. I want to stress that it would be easy to say technology is all bad. It's also easy to say, you know, the other generation is all bad. That is just ridiculous. Technology is here to stay. We are all here to stay in the same space with each other. We don't need to demonize technology. It actually is going to be a requirement of young adults and youth to use it. We also can't say, however, that all technology is benign. There tends to be this sense that, you know, oh, probably if it's on the Disney Channel, it's okay. Or probably if it's billed as an educational software, it's okay. I don't think we have the luxury of making those assumptions anymore. So my goal with you today is to help you figure out how to become these guides and navigators, how to choose which places are healthy places to spend online. And make your home welcoming to the body. Attend to all the senses. We tend to now just think about our visual and auditory senses. What about having smells and, you know, differing lights and differing art in your house? What about having toys? These are all, this is all stuff I took off of all my coffee tables. And you are welcome to come up and interact with any of it. I mean, take it to your seat and play with it at any time. Having things having places in your home that are screen-free, and then attending to all of the senses, taste, touch, sight, smell, sound. Does this make sense? It brings us back into our bodies. The upstairs part of the brain is that higher reasoning part. It's where you do like deep, complex thinking. You see big ideas and concepts. The downstairs part of the brain, like the downstairs part of a beach house, which has like the bathroom, the mudroom, you know, all the automatic things. The downstairs part of the brain is the automatic burping, farting, walking, breathing part. Now, the brain also has that left and right side. The left side of the brain is very linear, logical, linguistic. It loves that I just used a lot of L's all together. It's very like accountant brain, if we want to make really broad general stereotypes. The right side of the brain is kind of big and expansive and more expressive. It is more at its extreme kind of what would be considered chaotic, where the left brain is considered more rigid. So the left brain would stand up and sit down like this. Right? The right brain would stand up and like sit down like this. This is also kind of made more complicated by the fact that we don't just work on a neural system in our bodies, we also have an endocrine system which is like pumping hormones, right? So the endocrine system is like bathing our senses with these hormonal pulses, and then the brain has this wiring and has neurotransmitters, and now we've got access to such extreme levels of sophisticated stimulation that sometimes those work in concert and sometimes they do not. The other thing that's happening at the same time is that we are training the brain based on what we expose it to. So when you are exposed to a certain pattern, your brain knows, okay, I know to expect this pattern. So for instance, Laura Ingalls, when she woke up in the morning, knew that there was going to be no entertainment for the whole day, right? So her brain just had to go like, I'm going to be exhausted exhausted and bored at the end of this day, probably, right? Anymore, our brains know that we have access to constant stimulation, so we actually don't have to be prepared for waiting much at all. And this actually wires the brain. This goes to that concept of when we ask our kids to put their phones down or their devices away, they literally get anxious, they get panicky, because they have not been exposed to periods of silence, of quiet. They haven't developed the ability. Basically, we no longer, the brain works on the concept of use it or lose it, where it fires together, it wires together. If we are not firing the centers of the brain responsible for boredom and emotional regulation and stillness and self-control, they are pruned off. Now, the beautiful thing is we have this neuroplasticity, and so we can redevelop it, but it's much harder than if we are just keeping all of those channels, that jungle-like brain, going. This is especially important for kids because we know more than ever that that kind of taking time to be still and quiet builds both the gray matter and the myelinization of the brain. It also enhances the prefrontal cortex, which is the CEO of the brain. It's the part of the brain responsible for emotional regulation, attuned communication. That means like I can talk to you like this up here, but if we're talking one-on-one, hopefully I bring it down and talk like this. It makes us aware of our environment and helps us adapt. Social networking has a profound effect. There's lots of research out there that I'm sure you've seen that show that the more clicks in places like Facebook, the more likely you are to be depressed and anxious. Facebook has also just done research on its subjects. We are not Facebook's clients. We are their product. They sell us and our data to their advertisers. And so they can go in, when I did my dissertation when I was in graduate school, I had to get the okay of a use of human subjects committee who was making sure that I was treating all my subjects ethically. Facebook last year just went in and manipulated people's walls, and so they would manipulate the posts shown on a person's wall and make them more positive, and then watch to see what happened to their own posting. Sure enough, their posting became more positive. Whereas when they manipulated and had more negative posts showing on a wall, that person's behavior online became more negative. And this became a huge issue because they are doing research on us, and we need to know this. We also have so much data about all the social situations that are going on around us that we have this huge fear of missing out, right? We constantly know all the things that are available for us to do, and we see who's together at all times. So we can use this data to tell ourselves either that we're fantastic because we're at everything, or we're missing out and we're really struggling. Okay. This is the fourth area of impact, and the one that I am probably the most interested in. It's also the one that is least covered in the literature. The way in which we are interacting with our devices is profoundly changing the way in which we develop a sense of self, right? Again, Laura Ingalls just kind of had to know herself because there just wasn't all this stuff coming at her. Anymore, we can avoid having a real relationship with our insides, of knowing our strengths and our weaknesses, of encountering our own creative thoughts. We can avoid a lot of this now because we just have access to constant stimulation. We also are raising kids in a time where we're kind of telling them that their self is a commodity, and all their data is being saved, and all their data is being used in places that then also creates this algorithm of what is created and brought back to them, which makes their experience very self-centric. If I have searched for these certain things, those certain things are going to be the things that are constantly fed to me, rather than things that might expand my worldview or make me think differently. This ability to come back to oneself, to be able to kind of evaluate and know what situations do I thrive in, which do not help me, and how do I navigate and move between those. Part of what makes this very hard for us to accomplish anymore is that in Western culture, we really have bought the lie that stimulation is soothing. And what I mean by that is at the end of the day, when you go home, what do you want to do? You want to chill out with Netflix, right? Or you want to play a video game, or you want to check Instagram or Facebook, right? These are all things that are stimulating to our neurological and physiological systems, and oftentimes to our emotional centers and our gut. We don't know how to be deeply soothed. And this is huge for the development of an internal locus of control, to be able to turn away from all the outside stimulation and be able to be calm. So when we talk about emotional regulation, basically what we're talking about is an ability, number one, to feel our emotions, which is another thing that we aren't doing in the same way because we're so distracted, right? So when we can be distracted, we think we're kind of oh, we're just tuning out from our emotions, we're taking a break. But in reality, we're just shoving them, right? We're kind of just avoiding them, ignoring them. Part of telling ourselves the truth is that we have to be honest, that we really are being marketed to all the time now. I mean, do you guys kind of get that? Like, literally, it's not like people are creating devices and software and apps for the health and benefit of all of our country, right? No, they're developing them because it's their job to develop them and they make money. Okay, we want to kind of advance the healthy use of technology, so, moderation, and that's what we talked about when we said, it's easier to establish healthy norms than it is to break bad habits. But we all have habits, and habits are like supports of bridges that hold up our daily lives, right? So our kids, especially, if their habit is entertainment and social connection through their devices, we can't just come in and yank it away. We have to put other supports in place. And that's where we can do things like create contracts that help them know they're still going to have their device, they're still going to get to use it, but we're going to use it in this way. So for instance, we're going to check all our phones in at night, you don't get them again until you leave the house, and our mornings are going to be screen free. And we're going to have a fit in the week that we get used to this, but I'm going to, as a way of helping you tide that over, I'm going to give you sugar cereal every morning. And, or whatever it may be. But again, putting these supports in place to help us transition from the habits. We are not skilled at being still and quiet and alone for 10 minutes. And yet, we also have this profound body of research that shows us that an ability to be still, to be centered, to be regulated actually increases our creativity. It changes the way we interact with the world. But then I started telling them at my first lecture, the last lecture is going to be the best hour of your semester. I promise you, it is going to be the best hour. And like the faculty, the deans, the chaplains, they all told me, like, you're nuts. Because I would tell them, we're going to do a 10-minute silent sit in that last time. And they would tell me, you're nuts. No one's going to come. Last week, I had about 1,000 students at my first lecture, and after 5 or 6 times of saying this, we had 1,900 at that last lecture. They are starving for this, and I bet you guys are too. And we now know neurologists tell us that the best form of brain engagement, and the brain grows better and more robustly with embodied person-to-person connection. That's why teachers that hook us emotionally, we remember what they teach us, right? Because there's this experience.